The Treasury statement says the Gupta family leveraged its political connections to engage in widespread corruption and bribery, capture government contracts and misappropriate state assets. The designation targets the Guptas' pay-to-play political patronage, which Treasury says was orchestrated at the expense of the South African people. In a detailed release on its website, Treasury Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence, Sigal Mandel-Kerr, says the Guptas and their associate Salim Essa used their influence with prominent politicians and parties to line their pockets with ill-gotten gains, and that the United States will continue to exclude from the country's financial system those who profit from corruption. The sanctions announcement, they say, demonstrates the U.S. government's unwavering commitment to supporting the rule of law and accountability in South Africa. The release points to what is termed credible reports of their corruption schemes, including the Gupta family offering members of the South African government money or elevated positions within the government in return for their cooperation with Gupta family business efforts. It also references alleged attempts to bribe former Deputy Finance Minister SABC Jonas, who told the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture that he was offered the Finance Minister position in return for a 600 million rand bribe. The statement says the Gupta family was overpaid for government contracts and then used a portion of those proceeds of those overpayments to donate money to a political party. Ajay Gupta has been designated as the leader of the entity that engaged in corruption. Atul Gupta materially assisted, sponsored and provided support to an entity or those engaged in corruption, and according to Treasury was widely known as having overseen the family's outreach to corrupt government officials. Rajesh Gupta is said to have cultivated important relationships with the sons of powerful politicians and pursued business relationships in a province where corruption was rampant. As a result of the action, all property and entities owned directly or indirectly by the four sanctioned individuals with links to the United States are now blocked and must be reported to the Office of Foreign Assets Control. The law being applied here is known as the Global Magnitsky Human Rights Accountability Act and allows the United States to impose tangible and significant consequences on those who commit serious human rights abuses or engage in corruption, and then to protect the United States financial system from abuse by the same persons. Sherwin Bryce Peas, SABC News, New York.
So staying with this story to tell us more on why the United States imposed these sanctions, I'm joined from our Pretoria studios now by David Young, Deputy Chief of Mission here in South Africa. Mr. Young, thanks so much for speaking to us this morning. So can we just start with a brief explanation as to what led to these sanctions being imposed by the U.S. Treasury?
Good morning, Sakina. Certainly. The United States took this action because of the widespread corruption and bribery that was observed and documented here by the Guptas and their business associate Salim Essa. This was done over a period of time, and in our close collaboration with law enforcement officials here and senior officials in the South African government, we have learned of this very significant pattern of corruption. We have monitored this for months. It has been a long process, but we arrived at this very important step because we felt that it was so important to enforce accountability, the rule of law, and the efforts of the government here in South Africa today, President Ramaphosa's administration, to fight against corruption and for transparency.
So at the risk of creating the perception that the United States is actually meddling in the affairs of a sovereign state such as South Africa, what did that collaborative effort entail?
Well, we have a very close and strategic partnership with South Africa on law enforcement matters as well as on trade and investment and health and many others. One of the things that we have done is consult very closely as we have gone forward in this process, and we've had conversations just recently to inform the government and make sure they are aware at very senior levels what we were doing and why. Minister of Justice Lamola just released a statement last night that acknowledged our efforts and that, in a sense, we have a strong partnership to fight against corruption and for the rule of law. We have joint interests, and our mutual interest in transparency, good governance, and strong democracy mean that we go forward together. We have a mutual legal assistance treaty between our two countries that underpins all the work that we do in fighting corruption and supporting rule of law, and we will continue to work together in ways that we can to enforce these principles.
So just looking at these sanctions now, what does it actually mean for the Gupta brothers and for Salim Essa? And also, was there any independent investigations conducted by any of the U.S. law enforcement agencies?
Yes, these Magnitsky sanctions have 4 basic provisions. They prohibit travel to the United States. They mean that the United States government can seize any property held in the U.S. The 4 individuals are barred from entering into transactions with banks and companies, and any international companies with American subsidiaries or American companies would face U.S. sanctions if they deal with these individuals.
So given that South Africa is currently besieged with a whole commission of inquiry looking into allegations of state capture, of which this forms a critical component in some ways, are there any other individuals or entities that the United States government is keeping a close watch on?
Well, the Magnitsky provisions and other measures that we take to monitor corruption and human rights abuses, it's an ongoing process within our government. I don't have anything to announce at this time, but you can rest assured that our cooperation with our South African colleagues and partners is ongoing, and we will continue to monitor these important issues together.
Well, thanks so much for your time this morning, David Young there. And he is, of course, joining us from our Pretoria studios, and the Deputy Chief of Mission from the U.S. Embassy in Pretoria.